All right, but today we're talking about art styles and how to pick one. This will probably be more of a general presentation. It might help you with basic art, actually. Picking art styles is a very universal problem for anybody who's drawing, anybody who's like working on an animated series. Heck, this could actually help you with world building even. Hopefully, this could help you with your game. It's going to be pretty general. So, what is an art style, right? This is an art presentation. We gotta ask these questions. What is an art style? An art style is kind of a signature way for a person to draw. So you could usually, if you follow an artist, they might have a very distinct way of drawing eyes or mouths or noses, something that sticks out, something that's very, very known to them. And it's something that they'll repeat throughout various pieces of their work. No artist needs to have one art style. Some switch between a few. I personally switch between 4 art styles just because I like having variety. And sometimes art styles can change in medium as well. And we're gonna dig into this a little bit more. So in this definition, I said it's a signature way that an artist uses their media and the elements of art. So just to give some definitions in case people are rusty on some art school stuff. There's a lot of types of media. Media is your tools of trade. Oil paints, that's a medium. Drawing tablet or digital art, Copic markers, markers, color pencils, even latte art could be a medium for you. There's a lot of tools that you can use to make art and a lot of ways you can combine them to even contribute to your style. You don't have to stick to one. You can combine pretty much everything. Though it would be interesting to see how somebody combines oils and color pencils, but I bet they could probably do like a light brush of colored pencils over oils if they really wanted to try. That would be tricky. I don't recommend it. Well, I'm not going to not recommend it. If anybody tries it, let me know. And in art, there are 7 elements to design and stuff. Very important to remember. This is a pretty standard chart. I think it's straightforward. If anybody has any questions about this, feel free to pop those in the chat, but I will go run through these. In the 7 elements of art, they're usually used to describe a lot of like paintings and stuff. It's techniques artists kind of understand. So line, as you know, that's usually the borders of like either characters or how do you describe lines? I'm not, besides saying like a point, like a bunch of dots. It's kind of like, wow, I didn't think I'd have to describe lines. Lines, what you need to know about them is that they could be almost any shape. You can give them any textures, which is also important to remember. Shapes, there's a lot you could do with shapes. There's shape language. You could use that shape language in your game designs and stuff to either illustrate different moods and things. Like, for example, some people might use rounder shapes to indicate like a nicer looking character or sharper shapes for like either dangerous things and for dangerous things and stuff like spikes. So shapes are a quick way to communicate information. Form, that's usually shading. I think most of us know about shady art stuff. There's different ways you can shade. There's gradients. You could do cell shading, where it's basically like you color in a different, like a darker color just to give the illusion of shading. Space, that's kind of the stuff that forms around what you create. So if you look at that picture, you see a triangle, but there isn't actually a full triangle drawn out. We see the triangle because of the use of space. Texture, I like texture a lot. I wish I kind of incorporated it a little more in my own art. It sometimes gives your piece a little more dimension, just like form would, just like shading would. Value, that's just understanding different color gradients. And then, well, for example, that dark red might be your base red, but the more white you add, the lighter you'll get if you're mixing oil paints, for example. And color theory is really fun. I should have put a chart in here. Why didn't I put a color theory chart? There's different ways you could use a mixed color. I highly recommend checking out a color theory chart later, but color is very fun to play with. And color can be used for symbolism and stuff too. Like, oh yeah, blue, that could be either sad or like make you think about like outside right now. There's a lot of blues if you're in Rochester and you look out your window. You could almost argue, though you might say the leaves are green, you might say they're blue-green right now just because of the lighting. There's different ways you could look at color. You'd be surprised. I highly recommend you, if you have room in your schedule, to take the painting for non-majors class, because it's really fun to play with colors in that class and just have the paint right there, and you get to mix it and you get to really look at and understand colors. But yeah, that's just general art basics that I try to cram into like maybe a minute. I'm sorry if anything wasn't clear, please ask questions. But talking about art styles, these are two of my favorite artists. And if you were to compare these two artists, what do you guys think you would say they do differently, or what do they do that's the same? That's right, this is a workshop. I have questions for you guys. Realistic versus stylistic. That's good. That's good. They do use similar textures. Also, both of these artists are on Instagram. Highly urge you to follow them. Yes, they do use bright colors. Jamie totally uses more earth tones, more calming tones. They're very nature enthusiasts, or they're very enthusiastic about nature. So that tends to reflect in their art, which is cool to see. You'll see if you follow them, they'll do a lot of like they'll do some mushroom foraging every now and then. It's cool to see their life kind of leak into their art style. Yeah, close up versus full shots. That's definitely something that does stand out against these two artists in general. Though Flesh does do some full shots, Jamie is more prone to playing with that.
I guess I don't know, it's interesting. I feel like the like Jamie's might be like more cartoony in form, but Flesh is a little more cartoony in color, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out. They definitely exaggerate their colors, and that's something I've always liked with their art style. Alex, what you said, Wright has a lot of softer edges. Yes. Flesh uses a lot of textured brushes and stuff in their work, and kind of can kind of get a little messy with certain things. Like their initial drawing might be neat, but with their special effects, like with the yellow streak across the girl's face, um, definitely adds a lot of texture compared to Jamie, who also has a good amount of texture, but they have a softer style still. Any other things? If not, we could get going. Or another small thing is Jamie does use paints and stuff in their sketchbook a little more, whereas Flesh will take a picture of their sketchbook and scan over in color digitally. That's a small difference. It's kind of hard to see because sometimes it doesn't look like it's digital art, but Flesh does a lot of like scanning of their initial drawings and then makes them into digital art. Yeah, it's a little tricky to notice at first for sure. So in games, we tend to range from a few styles. We'll have pixel, cartoon, and realism. There's more than 3 styles, but I think we could agree like those 3 are like the main points that we come across. I would say that there is a large spectrum when it comes to styles. I threw my own art in there. You'll see some of my art in this presentation. I threw my own art there as a visual reference. As I said, I kind of go between a few styles, and it can really range. Like if you go back, you could say that Flesh is more realistic, but you want to put Flesh all the way at the realism end. So it's very important to kind of remember that spectrum. And even with The Last of Us, they're definitely further down with the realism, but you might notice that like there's still some stylistic aspects to the way that the characters are designed. I would think the eyes are actually a little bit bigger. That's something I tend to incorporate in my style because I think bigger eyes show more emotion. And that you might see that in a few art styles, or a bunch of art styles probably. That's I think one of the ways they try to ease any uncanny valley in some of those like hyper realistic games. That's a theory, but I think that's probably one of their workarounds. So how do I choose a style? How do I pick one? Well, you don't have to pick one. Fun fact. You could pick 2 or 3 to put in one game, but we'll get into that. So what's important to remember with art styles is there's a lot of things that influence it. It's important to consider the outside factors or more the realistic factors. You might not have that much experience with art. You might not have that much experience with 3D modeling, and you can't make those models on your own and then rig and then texture. That's a very long process. You might be able to draw a little bit, but you still might be afraid if you don't feel like your technical skills are really that good. I still suggest you practice drawing anyways. Everybody you should practice drawing. All it takes is practice to get good. That's all it takes. But even then, that's time. So you would need time to do your own art, kind of. Budget, maybe you want to outsource somebody to do your art, but you don't have the money. There's a lot of factors that come in, but what's good to remember is that with limitations comes really good stuff sometimes. Like we see this in game jams where we have very limited time, but sometimes people will make very impressive stuff. So some internal factors that can impact your style. Your theme of your game. I'll talk about Going Under a couple times in this. They went with more of a corporate theme to kind of mock them. They were very much a parody towards Silicon Valley. And because of that, they went with a more simplistic style. Your goals can impact your style. Like, what do you want to express? Do you want a lot of emotion in your game? Do you want strong silhouettes for readability in your game? Vision also, that's a thing. You might already have a faint idea of what you're looking for in your game. You can't quite define it, but you have some thoughts. And then inspirations. I'll talk about inspirations a bunch of times in this presentation. They can leak into your work. You might not even realize it. I have a few artists that I've referenced for my styles. One of them leaked in without me noticing. I had somebody look at my art once and it was like, hey, that looks like it could be an Ava's Demon, a webcomic I read. I was like, oh, really? I wasn't going for that. But yeah, it's kind of cool to see how art can kind of influence us when we're not intentionally thinking about it too. So let's talk about these 3 styles. They've got their pros and cons, and they have their own boundaries. Pixel art. There tends to be some rules with pixel art. I probably should have put the diagram in here, but there's very specific things you have to do in order to make pixel art look good. Who's to say you can't break those rules though? That's something you should remember throughout this whole presentation. Once you know the rules to something, you can always break them just to see where you go with your art. But as far as pixel art goes, usually there's rules as to how to make things look round or smooth, how to make things not look too jagged. And that can be kind of a lot to take in for people. You really got to adapt to pixel art to figure out what looks good, especially if you go with a more complicated art style. Sorry, Mert, I see you're in the chat, or you're in the call. Mert is my pixel artist on my game. Some people like pixel art strictly for the nostalgia. Some people like the nostalgia but want to push it, because pixel art started off as a very limited medium, but we have the technology to push it. So some games like Eastward, as some of you have been seeing, have been really challenging that with even colors and stuff. Pixel art is probably the quickest to work with out of these three styles. It's smaller scale, like physical scale. And then it's hard to emote through pixel art. So the main way you can show emotions in pixel art without scaling it up, because you can always scale up. The main way you could show emotions without scaling up, though, is through gestures of your characters. When you go to cartooning, there's a bit more freedom when it comes to art styles. With cartooning, you're bound to use a lot of the animation principles. You could even use them in pixel art. You could use squash, stretch, so you could like kind of exaggerate your character's movements. Your limbs aren't bound to any rules. Like I could probably bend my elbow the other way in a different art style, or I think it's like called rubber hose animation, where they could kind of like curl their arms in weird ways. You could do that if you want. You have, I argue, a lot more freedom if you go with a more cartoony style, because things won't look wrong in your style if you kind of dictate what you want in your own way. You're not limited to bones like you are in realism. No bones to break here. You could exaggerate expressions easily in a cartoon style, and that's something that people kind of lean towards when they choose a cartoon style. You don't have to, again, stay bound to the normal facial restraints that people have. You could push them even further. And if you push them, it makes your emotions even stronger. It's also quicker. Well, it's quick to do. I'd say pixel art is quicker. Generally, there's a lot of generalizations happening here, because you could even have like a cube with two eyes and say, here's my cartoon style. But in general, it's quick to do sometimes. You can even rig 2D animations if you have the right software. So you can make a whole puppet with 2D assets. And yeah, I already talked about larger emotions shared through faces and gestures. So yeah, that's the thing. You have both facial expressions and gestures, whereas with pixel art, if you're stuck with that small little scale, you might only be limited to gestures. For realism, there's firmer rules. You can't really turn your head all the way around or anything like that unless you're in a horror game. Then you could exploit the fact that something is unnatural to kind of push the horror or the fear in your game. I think realism, the appeal of it is that it tends to make the game feel a little more relatable, as in, maybe there's an off chance this can actually happen. I see this world. I feel like I could walk into this world. Just a bit. Realism can also take a bit of time to do in games. Say you're still doing 2D realism, there's going to be a lot of physical rendering for that artist. They're going to have to paint very detailed stuff. If you're doing 3D, you're going to be doing rigging. You're going to have somebody do texturing. You're going to need somebody to even animate those. That's a long process. Thankfully, with companies like Epic, I think it's slightly becoming a little more accessible, but we'll see how that goes. And then expressions, I think you can push normal human expressions. It's just harder to really exaggerate them. So you might be able to see them, but you can't push that feeling. You can't show too many emotions at once, I'd say, with realism. It's a little harder to do. So why would I go with pixel art? Why did I go with pixel art for my game? Time. That's mainly it. I wanted a quicker style, and I wanted to play with shape actually with this. So I wanted to make sure I had strong silhouettes. This could easily be done in 2D. Well, this is 2D. This could also be done in cartoon as well. And I feel like it's I'm sorry, Brendan, that the beautiful gradient lights aren't in this screenshot. But I also wanted to push the art style a little bit, so I did want to play with lighting, which is in the game but not in the screenshot, as Brendan pointed out. And Eddie pointed out that I've been using the screenshot for 2 years. But the main reason why I wanted to do this was for time. I didn't have to learn too much about 2D animation. And also with my process with doing pixel art, I usually started with a silhouette and almost kind of sculpted my pixel art instead of just drawing from scratch. And also, I knew that the focus of the game, at least the main gameplay, was going to be on the characters' actions rather than their dialogue. But why would I go for cartooning in my game? Because this will also appear in my game. I do want to have character portraits. And the reason why I would use a 2D, or I gotta stop saying 2D, the reason why I would use a cartoon style is so I could show their emotions easier. I can squash and stretch their faces, as creepy as that might sound to anybody who doesn't know animation. I can really push their emotion, and that's what I want to be able to do with a very simple cartoon art style for dialogue. Though I am not rigging for Uprooted, you can again rig 2D animation. That's why some people go with a lineless style actually, and mainly use strong shapes, is so that it's easier to rig. Communication with this art style is usually clear. You can really, again, get the emotion out of the character faster with the cartoon. And why would I go with realism? I don't think this art style will appear really in the game, maybe promotional material. I would still use this because of like relatable emotion in this, and this picture, as I stated in the caption, is not realistic, but it's closer to the realism realism side of the spectrum when it comes to my art style. I would use this to kind of push other things. So I push color. I try to make things feel a little more real, a little more tangible. And again, with 3D in general, of course, I'm not rigging in the screenshot, but that one requires rigging usually, unless you are doing a 2D realistic style. I haven't seen it done too many times. I'd be interested in seeing a 2D realism game. Oh, and even if you go realism, there's with realism, there's other ways you can exaggerate stuff. Like you can exaggerate with color still. I think that's important to remember. So my character Anaya, you can kind of see she's going through something. Her eyebrows are kind of like scrunched. She's really thinking. I think the blues in the piece actually kind of exaggerate her feelings there. So that's something to consider. There's different you could use the 7 elements of art to play with your style in any way. And I think I probably do it here with color and maybe even lighting. Owen pointed out that Mirror's Edge is a wonderful example of a realistic art style with exaggerated color. And yes, it is. I haven't played it, but I've seen gameplay. That game aged really well with its art style. It's still impressive to me. They use, for people who don't know, mainly they use white structures and stuff, but whatever you could climb on is usually red. So it really pops, and it does still feel natural to the world, which is really cool. You know what, Owen? Maybe I'll do a Mirror's Edge live stream. So how do we make an art style? We know some things. We know there's 7 elements of art. We can use different mediums. There's different reasons to be on any part of the. Let me get to it. I didn't realize how far this was. Why did I commit to this? Okay, any part of the style spectrum. You can land anywhere on there. And we know that you can use multiple styles. Because as I said, for my game, I'm using pixel art for the gameplay and then cartoon for the dialogue. So how do we do this? Let's start with adjectives. Heck, even if you guys want to follow along and throw in some adjectives to other games that you were thinking about, go ahead and throw them in chat. Ask yourself, how does your game feel? What textures are in your game? If your character could feel things, what would they feel? What emotions are they dealing with in the circumstance that you're throwing them in? What are the sounds? What does it sound like when you're running on leaves? What does it sound like when you're chopping down a tree or fighting something? These can add to your game. Is it echoey? Does that mean you're maybe in a building or like a cave? There's different ways you could take some of these adjectives and kind of start going to places. Because I know some people might start with just a mechanic, but they might not know where exactly they want to go. So starting with adjectives can make it clearer, especially when you think about your themes. Again, Going Under thought about its themes, and since they wanted to go corporate, they wanted to do the overly simplified art style, which is, oh, I love Going Under. I'm sorry, I always have to gush over it. So anybody who is working on a game, you don't have to give context to your game, but just throw in adjectives in the chat that describe your game.
Also, ask yourself how willing you are to learn about shaders, especially if you want anything that's not realism. That's the one plus of realism, is a lot of game engines, especially Unreal, are out of the box built for realism. So if you don't want a realistic art style, you're gonna have to learn how to make shaders.
I haven't needed to make a shader for Uprooted yet, so we're so far good.
She will.
Yes, Brendan. Fast. Give us more. Come on, people. Maybe we can make a hypothetical game out of these random adjectives. Edgy is both a texture and a mood. Sparse. Ooh, comfy. Geometric. These are good. These are really good starting points. Gamey. Yeah, you could do a film or a scene. Again, as I stated in the beginning of this, these principles go way beyond games. Of course, Christian, you would bring Genshin Impact into this talk. Thank you so much for bringing up this game. Thank you. There's no sarcasm in my voice. Abstract. Yes, that would be really cool. Playing with cubism. Brendan. That's all I'm saying, Brendan. I guess that's fair. If I gush about Going Under, you gush about Genshin. Ooh, exciting, comedic. Yes. Yeah. That's interesting to think about. That you could attribute that to really good world building. What Owen put in the chat is in Half-Life 2, if you think real hard, you could kind of smell the crisp air or something.
Smell-o-vision is very important for games. We've discussed this on the Discord before. You know, Bloodborne, that game looks like how it smells, for sure. Cooking games, your game should look like how it smells. That's the only way to choose an art style, actually. This presentation is canceled.
Wow. Julian said everything in Fallout New Vegas feels grimy and would definitely smell awful. Well, very good. I'm very happy with these adjectives that we're seeing. So I'm gonna go over some other games adjectives that we could get as a reference or inspiration. So, as I've said maybe 4 times now, Going Under, they wanted to make fun of Silicon Valley, so they decided to use a simplistic art style for their 3D game. Yeah, corporate art style, but we love it when Going Under does it. I mean, look, she's so happy. With this style, they were really able to exaggerate movement because it's cartoon and because, especially because they are lineless in their main gameplay art style. You notice though, for their dialogue, they do switch to cartoon, and part of that is so you can see the emotions better. There's only so much emotion you could show in that simplistic face. So they decided to push it with more of an in the middle type face. And I really love their still lineless kind of art style for dialogue. Yeah, emotionless corporate. John Haley's right with the first art style. I also really love how they use bright colors. They are going off of the corporate theme, but they do still make it their own, and they still make it look appealing. Going Under is a really pretty game, in my opinion. And then Brendan said, I love what Celeste does during dialogue, jumping between pixel art and fully illustrated magic. That is a good point. You can, you don't even have to stay in the same art style for your effects. That's something important to remember. You could change art styles whenever you want. That can be your style. And then Fabian also said, Going Under's 3D model looks kind of like After Effects minimalist puppets or pictogram people. The other thing to remember with Going Under is that there's when they were making this, they're still a small team, but they were an even smaller team. So with the style, they were able to make animations a bit faster too. And it looks pretty quick to model some of their stuff. Like that desk is probably just a rectangle, and it doesn't take a lot to really make that curved thing. As if you take 3D asset production in GDD, some of this stuff will feel pretty tangible and simple to do. Oh yeah, and it's probably fast render, as Will said. And another thing is, some people might see the style and be like, oh, that's easy. Like I just did, kind of. That's easy to do. They're kind of being lazy. First off, they are following a theme and they are following it well. Second, if you look at the shaders in Going Under, they're actually really impressive and push. They push the game even more. There is even some textures that push. So if you look in the back, they kind of use stippling, which is a type of shading that uses dots, and it adds like this very nice texture, kind of like natural soft texture to the environment. Next game I'm going to talk about is Don't Starve. Don't Starve probably taught me how to draw, because I was 14 and I got angry that I couldn't draw, and then I saw this game and I was like, I could draw that. Then I drew it and it looked good, and then I kept drawing Don't Starve screenshots from their trailers. Again, if you practice drawing, you will get good, I promise. You just got to challenge yourself while you practice. If something is hard to draw, that's good, you're learning. But Don't Starve, if you don't know what it is, you start out as playing as a gentleman scientist named Wilson, who gets sucked into this hell-like world where everything is trying to kill him, and his main thing is just trying not to starve. He'd like to leave, but in order to leave, he has to not starve. So in this world, we can see some of the textures used. You'll notice that the lines are kind of rough. There's a lot of sharp edges. They use a lot of earth tones, but they're still dim. And what else? What else could you say while looking at the screenshot about Don't Starve? What else can you kind of get from this game? That's right. We're still interactive.
It's sort of, like a picture book kind of look, like pop-up book feeling. Because, Don't Starve is like, it's sort of like Minecraft, but like from like an isometric perspective. So they sort of go with like the billboard pop-up look for all the things in the world that aren't like part of the background and stuff.
Yeah. Also, their characters, I want to point out, have very strong silhouettes, which is awesome. Very distinguishable. And their animation trailer, when you talk about pop-up book, what's interesting is they kind of make it look like their characters are drawn on paper and kind of like just stuck on a background, which is really cool. Now I'm going to read some of the comments about describing the Don't Starve art style. Somebody said Don't Starve's Owen said Don't Starve's definitely going for a gothic kind of dealio, Halloweeny even. Some people like to do a Tim Burton crossover, even though Tim Burton isn't like his style. People like to put Don't Starve characters in that style and do the reverse because they'll make that connection. William said there's no square rectangles. Yeah, everything's kind of a little disheveled. Very much everybody's just trying to do their best to survive. Not a lot of time to make things perfect because you're doing what you can. Somebody said, yeah, like a gothic fairy tale. Owen said, oh, true, there's no squares. Everything must be jaunty, very fun. Jaunty, good word. Cool chat. It feels kind of bold, like the characters' assets pop out at you. Yeah, and that's pretty good. That makes things really readable for the player. They use black borders constantly, and that's just, again, easy to make things pop out. That's why Smash has that mode where they can put lines over the characters if things get a little busy, as things in Smash Bros. Do. Alex said, almost feels like the art style is ironic in a way. I could kind of see that. I mean, the characters are really over it. They don't want to be there. I think that type of attitude is kind of fun to push in this game. And their dialogue is pretty sarcastic too. Yeah, silly in a straight face kind of way. Mert said, I think it's that the drawing-like style can be associated with child/kid things, whereas the theme is dark and broody and mature. Jordan says, it seems kind of kid-like at first glance, maybe stressing that feeling of not knowing where you are. And not even the spiders want to be there.
Very Tim Burton. It also reminds me of this TV show. They used to be on like Nicktoons or something, Edgar and Ellen. Also very Tim Burton-esque. If you've ever, heard of that show, that kind of like spooky for kids, that kind of feeling.
And again, the dialogue in this game is pretty sarcastic. Wilson makes a lot of puns, which is why he's one of my favorite characters. Very, very fun cast of characters. And you'll notice that a lot of them actually have stress marks under their eyes or dark circles. I think this gives a little bit of visual storytelling that, again, these characters are just really tired and don't want to be here. So let's talk about Deathloop without spoilers, because I only got a few hours in. Please, no spoilers. When we look at this art style, definitely more on the realistic side of things. But if you look at like Juliana's face, for example, you see her eyes are a bit bigger. That gives us a bit more emotion to play with. So I really like that with like Overwatch did it, and now Deathloop is kind of doing it. I think it's a really unique way to do realism in video games, and that some studios should really try to play with that a little bit more because it's fun. So Deathloop, when you see those colors, they use a lot of warm colors. Some people might even describe it as vintage. Colors can be used to describe time periods. Oranges, yellows, very often used to describe vintage things, whereas blues or cyans are used to describe futuristic things or technology. In Deathloop, I can't quite name the time period because some of the technology still feels a bit modern, but it's kind of cool to see it. And even though these colors are stereotypically used for these things, always feel like you could push it. Nobody is saying you can't use warm colors for the future. It's kind of weird that we use cool colors for the future a lot. Why do we think everything's going to be cold and metallic? Why can't things be more earthy in the future?
Because technology is made of metal.
Not enough fruited. Oh,
I also
because the
wanna-
future is cold and grim. Thanks, John.
As a fellow Deathlooper, I also want to point out something Deathloop does is, color palette, because the game is split up into 4 different areas and 4 different times of day. So like every area has its own like colors, and that changes. Like times of day have their own colors, so you sort of get that mix of like Updom, which is like the main hub of the game, is sort of like a city district. Like it feels very different when you go there in the morning compared to the afternoon, because in the afternoon like a blizzard hits the whole island. So you go from like these warm like colors in the early half of the day, and then it gets really cold in afternoon and night. So it's sort of, and like that's the whole game too, like all the areas sort of get like that, and that sort of feeds into the idea of like you're nearing the end of this cycle. You're upping the ante, you're making things feel more dangerous.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's really good on the designers to give like a different feel in each level too. It really hammers home like, hey, you're in this space, and that space will stick with you. You'll kind of start to remember things easier, and you won't get as confused on different maps. As someone might say that's good character design, we'll say that's good level design. They have really strong visuals in this game, and I really appreciate it when artists are heavily involved, because I feel like people don't always know how much they can help when it comes to games. We're gonna read some of the. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, you can.
There's a really cool trick in Wind Waker. I'll see if I can find the video and post it. Where like that game's cel shaded, right?
Mhm.
But so it has like a day-night cycle. I think I never played it, but it has a day and night, and then there's like different locations and stuff, and there's different weather and things. And for all of the like different combinations of all that, they have like different hard-coded palettes, color palettes that they use for the
That's
cel
cool.
shading. So the artists basically decide specifically what like links, like dark and light parts like will be tinted for like if it's like raining or if it's like dark or night. And I think that's a really cool like artistic feature.
Yeah. Something that I try to do with my colors now, especially with shading. Well, not now, just in general. You should try to see if you could shade without using black. That's a pretty basic thing to do. Try using other colors. Maybe a darker color really looks orange instead of what you might have thought is gray. Really push what that actual color might be. Now I'm going to read some comments. Why do I keep saying comics? Alex said, sort of like Overwatch's style with RTX on. LOL, it's pretty sweet. That's a very good description. Even the characters follow the warm, earthy colors. Wow, yeah.
Actually, I do want to point out the enemies, especially in the early part of the loop, are very brightly colored. Like they're wearing party masks and stuff. They really stand out against the environment. Like you'll be in like this earth tone like zone, and then somebody will be wearing like a bright gold or pink outfit, and they really stand out, and you're like, oh, that's enemy. That is person amongst all this earth tone stuff. So think about that. Like think about the characters in the world. Like art style isn't just like what the world looks like. It's how everything interacts. Because you're making a video game. You want things to stand out and be readable.
Yeah. Mert said, also realism has a lot of detail. The more detail something has, the more realistic it can seem. Even in sculpture, you can see it. Think Greek and Roman statues. And back on what Eddie was just saying, that's strong color language can go far. I mean, again, Mirror's Edge, and even look at games like Super Hot. They just use, I think, 2 colors, and still the style feels really strong. There's a lot of stuff that's really quick to communicate. I think that's why The Last of Us's colorblind feature, or not colorblind, just I think it's just a general blind feature for accessibility where they'll make like everything white, yourself and I think buddy characters blue and enemies red, because it's easy to see those colors. It's easy for the brain to process where those things are. Joseph says the colors are vibrant but not exaggerated so that warmth feels genuine, almost like home or a happy memory. Yes, very good point. I do really love the color work in this game. But yeah, you can have again a very realistic style and still exaggerate the colors. There's always something you could push. All right, another big thing when it comes to making a style is making a mood board. So we just looked at some adjectives that describe those games. I mean, we talked about general things with Deathloop. Do you guys want to throw in a couple adjectives about Deathloop so we can say that we talked about all these adjectives? You guys said warmth a lot. Yeah, mood boards. Bright, retro, otherworldly. Those are some words I used to describe it. Eddie, you got any adjectives for Deathloop?
I'm struggling to think of a joke about how you haven't killed me in Deathloop yet.
You
Um,
can't just say that.
I'm sorry, I'm slandering you in front of all the club. Kaylee needs to get good. That's what the adjective for Deathloop is.
Oh, look, Joseph said nostalgic. There we go. Yeah, because of the warm colors, and it gives like that retro feel. Definitely gives some kind of nostalgic. And also, really, it doesn't even have to be retro. A lot of times, even in film, when we look at a past memory, they'll use those orange filters. Honestly, a lot of stuff that film does sets some of these stereotypes. And again, it's also fun to push and challenge the stereotypes.
Not to sit on Deathloop too long, but the 70s futurism definitely feels like they were going for like old school spy and assassin movies, because like that's part of the core gameplay is like these rival assassins and the multiplayer component. And a lot of 70s movies, like James Bond, stuff like that, it's about that, like the original Mission Impossible stuff. It's all about that spy fiction, and you can really feel that influence in Deathloop.
Yeah. And that's another way that theme can influence your style. And that theme of being, hey, rival assassins, we've seen this in movies. Let's replicate that. Some people say, when just finding ways to describe Deathloop, some people said 70s futurism, autumn-esque, definitely from those warm tones, I get you. Maybe it's just in the screenshot, but it's almost looks holiday-ish. I can see that, bright lights, snow, for sure. Okay, now let's actually talk about mood boards. This was the mood board for Uprooted. I really wanted to get, the game takes place in a forest where technology is part of nature. So one of the, is it in there? Yeah, this hasn't been put in the game yet. I want to find a way to use it, probably maybe closer to the ending of the game. There's like an art exhibit called a pixel forest where there's like a bunch of like string lights and like moving walls and stuff. Visually moving walls, they're not physically moving. I used, a good thing to do when you're making a mood board is to start with a general background image. So I used a forest. I used the forest floor to give myself a texture, like, hey, this is something I already feel from the world. And then I thought about what art styles I might like. I wanted to do pixel art because it felt easier to do, but I wanted a little more complicated art style. So I looked at some other pixel artist shapes. And when it came to color palettes of woods, I thought, hey, I kind of want a darker forest. And I kind of got to that recently when I added lights, which I'm excited about. And then for emotions, no spoilers to Uprooted, but I did like the emotions when they were apparent. I did like the emotions in Breath of the Wild. Sorry if that was a spicy take. I feel like Link can stop being a silent protagonist at any point, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, you could use Pinterest. If you use Pinterest, be careful. I go down art rabbit holes where I will just spend time looking at art and forget to actually put things on my board because there's just so much cool art out there. Throw whatever reminds you of your game on your art board. It could be textures, it could be lighting, it could be character designs or silhouettes, anything. As long as it reminds you of your game and gets you closer to what that vision might be for your style, put it on the mood board. So, drafting concept art. This was concept art that I did for my GDD2 game. It was kind of inspired by Going Under because we were making a roguelike that was kind of ironic. And I wanted to be like, hey, I like Going Under's art style where it's like simple shapes. It feels like it would be easy for us to animate in 2D. But I kind of want to play with texture. So that's what I did with the left style. And I was like, okay, what if I thought about more of a chibi style? Because the premise was you were trying to fight people to make your way out of an anime convention that you didn't want to be at. So that's where the chibi style came in. yeah, I'm glad you like that, Brendan. It's technically playable. We did not get as far as we wanted to with the art because my computer decided to not work when this project started. So we only have like a rough idle animation. If I could probably go back at any time and do the rest of the assets, but it was a very fun prompt for us to kind of base our game around. But again, when I said that external factors can affect your art style, although theming wise, the right one might be better since again, chibi and then anime is a popular thing. Well, anime is a popular thing. Anime was kind of our theme. You would have thought we would have went with the right art style, but we actually went with the left because of time and because I thought, hey, it looks easy for me to just take those shapes and just move them around and make a puppet. I made a rig. And so I went with the left style just because it used stronger shapes and I didn't have to worry about lines being messy, especially since lines are already messy in the left style. Okay, how do I steal the style? Fun fact, every art style is probably stolen. I'm gonna teach you how to do that. Let's steal.
Unless
We're
you're
gonna
Grug
steal.
from cave painting times, then you're good.
Yeah. So when it comes to stealing art, we gotta be careful because art theft is a really real, inactual thing. We're talking about being a good art thief. We want to not steal from one person. No, that's lame. We're gonna steal from multiple people. And we're gonna take the things that we like from those multiple people, and we're gonna make a style. Yes, everything is derivative. Yes, Brendan. Exactly. True originality is fake, and that is something you need to kind of understand and accept. I know some people are like, I want to make this profound game that nobody's ever seen before. You can do that, sure. It's going to be really hard though if you start from nothing. So sometimes starting with things like this, like other art styles and stuff, and taking what you like, that can help. Study. That's one of the good theft things. I've done art studies in the past for different art styles that I liked. And again, as I said, if you want to get good at art, practice art. Practice, do it. Practice art. What did I say, chat? What did I just say? Practice art. What did I say? Say it back, chat. I see you, chat. There we go. There we go. Come on, Owen. You can do it. You can say it. Practice art. Just get good. Oh my God. Easy. Art practice. Wow. Skills are inherent. You don't need to practice. But Christian. Also, when I was first starting out with art, I was stubborn about not using construction lines. They help you a lot. They will get you there quicker. Look up what construction lines can do for you. Ask your doctor what construction lines can do for you. Having a lot of money will also make you good at art. Well, Mert, I don't have money for Uprooted. And I still get good art. Are you sure? Mert, are you okay? I think your art's really good. Take drawing for non-majors if you're GDD. Yes. Yes, William. Yes. Very, very good advice. There are 2 art classes that we can take. Will they count as artistic perspectives? No. Do I know why? No, they just don't count. But if you have a free elective or just free time, you want a class that can kind of let you wind down, do take these art classes. They aren't putting that much pressure on you. It feels really good to just have an art class where you go and you make something. It feels nice. Take a drawing class that will help you with your practical skills. Take a painting class that will help you with your colors. Highly recommend. Please, if you still can, if you still have time before you graduate, either take painting for non-majors or drawing for non-majors. So back to proper art theft. You have to steal certain things from things that you like in order to make that style that might appeal to you. Because that's the thing, the style does have to appeal to you for you to like working with it. So I'm gonna exploit myself. I'm gonna show you artists that I've stolen from to make my art. It's taken many years for me to develop my style. But again, it helps practice and people. Wow, Eddie. Adults generally do learn things a little bit quicker. So if you just give it a shot and just practice, you can get there. Please practice art. So things that I took from art styles that I liked. I really liked Ava's Demons art style because of, wow, I just accidentally made chat really large. I just wanted to move it so I could see Michelle's beautiful art. I liked the colors a lot. I don't tend to exaggerate colors that much in my flat 2D cartoon art. I would like to push it someday. I would have to do an art study of Michelle's work, so I would still have to practice in order to really get those values in. But I was already trying to play with Finn's hair over here. And you could kind of see that it's not an exact copy, but it's definitely replicating what she does with her digital brushes. I wanted to get that extra texture in the way Michelle does hair into my own art to just add a bit more. And I accidentally made chat big again. I really love Sirva, who's also known as Sam Man. She does really great line work. Her expressions are really strong, but also her facial features are really distinct. I'd put her more on a realistic side of the scale, not all the way over, but she's definitely tilting towards there. Look at those eyes. Those eyes are big. You could get a lot of expression out of them, just like Michelle's or Nina on the right. I specifically liked how Sirva uses extra lines to push that emotion. So this isn't the biggest example of it, but sometimes I'll put like a little extra line over the eye to kind of push the emotion more. I kind of think of it as like, oh, I basically get 2 eyebrows when working with a style like that. And it helps me. It helps me push that emotion. I also liked something my friends tell me is that for my more realistic end of my style, I tend to focus on noses more. Part of that is because I don't want my characters to have the same face. I try to avoid same face syndrome. If you want to know about same face syndrome, see Overwatch. Sorry. But I wanted that uniqueness. I felt like my characters would feel more real if they had more facial variations or just distinct things. So compared to Anaya, Finn has kind of a longer, sharper face. And then over here in the top right, we have Emil Charlie 9's art style. This is what happens when you learn art strictly from the internet. I consider myself more so self-taught, and again, I learned by studying art styles. Strong expressions. If you see me use like heart mouths in my characters, I got it from that artist. I usually reference them for stuff like some colors. I think I developed my cell shading habits from looking at her art style. And yeah, I tend to like to have some blush in my characters. Eddie might call me out for Tumblr nose, if you know what that is, which is valid.
I've never called you out for Tumblr nose. I just silently judge you for it.
Oh, okay. I've been called out for it before. The reason, so Tumblr nose, for people who don't know, it's just using a very good amount of blush, making the nose usually red and like kind of exaggerating the cheeks. I like to do it sometimes because I think it adds more color to the drawing and gives characters just a little bit more life.
I prefer advanced Tumblr nose, where they have like the thing over their nose. Like, you know how some characters will have a band-aid over their nose? I like the version where it's like the blush is just like a line over their nose, but not the whole nose. It's hard to describe.
Like, yeah, you said like a band-aid, right? And it's almost like the I think it's usually supposed to be like, how do I describe this? So okay, so like where the cheeks are like the slant, kind of. I think that's where they try to put it, almost under the eyes, but still on the upper part of the cheek.
That is my preferred form of Tumblr nose.
It's definitely a form of Tumblr nose. I'm glad you're saying that. But don't feel intimidated by the fact that that is a stereotype. In art, you could still use it. Again, I said that I use it because it adds more color to the face, and that's what I like. But yeah, my art style is made up of a bunch of different art styles. This might not even be the full list. I know I drew in Vivian Mirando's style way back. She's the person who is making or leading Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss. I used to draw her style a lot, and then I decided I wanted to be more on the realistic side with my art, and I kind of leaned it towards these artists. So your style can also change over time. Don't feel trapped in a style. If you get bored of a style, go study another artist's style, and you could bring some of that stuff back and maybe exaggerate your own style and push it. But yeah, that's how I committed Art Thief. You could do it too. Or theft. Imagine talking, right? But yeah, you're going to have a lot of inspirations. Mix and match them and put them into your games. You might not reference the same stuff for your visual effects, as I think Brendan mentioned, or your dialogue, or just your overall gameplay. You could even change your gameplay art style in different levels if you want. I've thought about doing that in a potential game, but that's for future, Caitlin. But yeah, that's pretty much my whole presentation. I think that's the first time I've made a presentation that's actually lasted over an hour, kind of. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, opinions about the presentation, hot takes?
I just want to add on to, like, you know, we discussed pixel art briefly, but some of you may be aware of, like, you know, as time marches on, people are kind of moving on from pixel art to like later things that are getting older, like the haunted PS1 movement, if you've heard of that. And we're starting to see PS2 era style stuff popping up. Wink, wink, play personalize. But like that kind of thing, it sort of follows that same ethos of like, you know, very strict rules because you're emulating a certain era of technology. So that's something you want to think about. Because like you're not locked in, especially with like pixel art. Like this is kind of going beyond just general style and more like, well, not really, but it's like it's what you want because you know some pixel art games try very hard to look like they could have come out for the console they're made for. Like compare Shovel Knight to Hyper Light Drifter. Both games use pixel art. You would never think Hyper Light Drifter came out for an old retro console, but Shovel Knight, you could be like, well, is this playable on the NES? Is there a version of this that's on an NES cartridge? Because that seems feasible. Like there's a difference, you know, based on like, you know, what do you want to do with emulating that technology? And that's something we've had to think about for personalized because we're still not sure. It's like, do we want to look like an exact PS2 game? Or do we want to look like something that could have maybe been a very polished, upgraded port of a PS2 game? And it's like, what do we want? How much do we want to evoke that aesthetic? And it really goes for like, it's really more up to you for like, do you want the nostalgia factor? Is it just meant to convey a certain feeling? Like Haley was talking about earlier, especially with Deathloop. So it's like, do you want, you know, you should know the rules, but you also are allowed to break them, basically. When it comes to like retro art styles. Because fun fact, Xbox 360 era is retro now. That's over 10 years old. 15-year-old generation. You can make a very mediocre looking PC game and it's a retro game now. Congratulations.
Will said, I'm taking a traditional art course, drawing for non-majors, and I love it, and I want to apply those mediums to game art. Has anyone experimented with scanning traditional art into games, or are there traditional art inspired approaches to doing digital art? Amori, I think, actually uses scanned art. I'm pretty sure I saw a video about it. That one's really popular right now. There's definitely other games that use traditional art. Julian, you unmuted. Do you know some?
Cuphead definitely does. That's kind of a famous example.
Are they pencil? Are they scanned?
Yeah,
Or
they
pencil and ink?
drew out all the animations by hand and scanned them in.
Oh, cool. Wait, Hollow Knight is too? No, Hollow Knight has gotta be digital. Or is it?
Is it? I never knew about Hollow Knight. That's impressive though.
They were hand drawn. What? But it looks so digital. What? That's insane.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
TF2
wow.
is still digital though. Like they didn't. I don't think they hand drawn that. It was just inspired.
Did you guys know that there's a whole Van Gogh movie where all of the frames in it are oil paintings? It's insane.
What?
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. It's been on
Oh,
my list to watch for a while. Anyone have any other art questions as people bring up those games that are basically traditional? When I was young, I used to consider myself a tradigital artist because I was both traditional and digital. Fun facts with Kaylee. I think I'd still call myself that. I still use my sketchbook. But I do use my Cintiq a little more because it is a Cintiq. If I could just use undo instead of erasing, it helps. Makes things faster. Well, if nobody has any other questions, we will take this over to our Discord for social hour. I will take a minute because I got to do something, but then I'll be back and join whoever's in there. I hope you guys like this presentation. We don't do a lot of art presentations in this club, so I'm happy to do
Yeah.
one for you guys.
We should do more.
Oh,
Art is
we gotta
important.
press it. Yes, it is.
And music, maybe.
Thank you, Fabian. I'm
Now go
glad
out
you
and
guys are
pre-order
liking it.
Bayonetta 3. Do it now. I command you.
Draw something tonight. Ha, we got another,
More
Homework.
homework?
yeah, we got another
What is something right
presentation
now?
with homework. Draw something, anything. Be self-indulgent. Maybe even to like experiment with art styles that you like. Do look at something that you like and draw it and replicate it. You will learn from that.
Draw it and put it in your game that Kent wants you to make for the game jam. Homework.
Yeah.
Double up.
If you draw something neat, post it in art feedback and at me and be like, Kaylee, look, I did it.
Actually,
Kaylee, I
let me,
made something.
I have my sketchbook right here. I'm very bad at
Yes.
drawing, but I have
Love
to give
see it.
I have to give sketches to my actual 3D artists. So
That's
enjoy.
another. Yes, that's another thing too. You'd be surprised how much
Amazing.
artists-
Enjoy my lovely sketches. I'm not giving you any context for these. The other ones are labeled.
I did that for Subdivide too, actually. Like to give my artist like an idea of what I wanted. I had to like kind
Sketching
of
helps
draw
them.
like a sketch.
sketching helps them a lot, like a lot.
Very
You'd
good
be
skill.
surprised.
Have fun with my people. Our lads.
Those
That's it.
lads.
I should show you. Where is it? It's in here somewhere.
If
Oh,
you're
yes. The original sketch of our shadow enemy, who you may or may not have seen in my previous sharings,
nice,
personalized.
we
This
love
arm
concept.
is probably the best thing I've ever drawn. That's as good as it gets.
You know, if you draw more of those arms, you'll get really good at drawing those arms. Fun fact.
Oh, trust me, I've added it to the list of 2,000 skills I'm trying to learn right now.
Yes.
I'm almost done with riding a bike. We're getting there.
Work in progress. A whip.
I
NWIP.
drew a face.
Good.
Also, this isn't a character or anything. You're not getting any context for what this is. But I sketched this just earlier today. So have fun with that.
Yeah, if you're working with an artist or if you're commissioning a piece, sometimes just a very, very simple thumbnail sketch will tell the artist a lot about what you're looking for, and it helps a
Also,
lot.
get one of these guys. They're action figures. I love using this guy for references to show my 3D artists, like, I want this kind of pose for this animation. And I also use it because I'm also dabbling in 3D animation. And also, it's a fun action figure. Get one of these.
Oh, there is a website that like kind of lets you do that. I forget what
It's
it's
very
called though.
different to hold
I
in your
linked-
hand.
I
though.
know, but like if you don't have one, you know, like
Julian.
it's convenient.
I think I linked that in either community resources or club resources. We do have
Yeah.
the link somewhere. I could
I think
relink
at some
it
point.
after.
All right, yeah.
Also, don't get the girl version of this. It sucks. And it has bad limbs. Just get this one. Don't get Body Chan. Get Body Kun. That is my professional advice.
Please respect women when you draw.
I am the ultimate woman respecter. I do not respect badly engineered women made by
Yes.
Bandai.
Yes, go off. But yeah, let's move over to the Discord. I'll
All
take a
right.
second to appear, but I'll be there. Thank you for coming to this meeting again. Glad you guys liked it. See you there.
Go pre-order Bayonetta 3. It's a win for the LGBTs every time you do it.
Hashtag not a sponsor.